Welcome to the Empathic Mastery Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Moore, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a place where we talk about what it means to be highly sensitive and empathic, how this impacts all aspects of our lives, and we explore tools, resources, and solutions so we can shift from absorbing all the thoughts, feelings, and energy of the world around us to being beacons for calm, love, and healing. Hey there, everybody. Today, I have a really special episode that is especially for this time of year when the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead become thinnest. So if you're not listening to this like October, November time, that's when we originally did this podcast episode. So my guest is Helen Morris. And in 2017, Helen experienced what she considers the greatest tragedy, yet also the greatest gift: the death of her gorgeous 18-year-old daughter, Tal, in a motor vehicle accident. Tal let Helen know of her passing, which allowed her to view death from a completely different perspective. It also transformed her life completely as her spirituality grew exponentially. She accessed energy healing to heal herself of chronic conditions and started a podcast, which is how we connected, called The Beautiful Side of Grief, where she found beauty in her own grief and have helped others navigate that journey. Helen is an empath who has found calm, peace, and joy in serving others. Helen and Tal, I just really want to welcome you both here today.
Oh, Jan, thank you so much. We've been looking forward to this. And I say we because I know that my girl is very instrumental in being a part of my podcast. And so she's equally excited. And I'm sure she'll have a few things to say as we get this conversation underway. So thank you, Jan.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. So I always love to start with, so you're an empath. What does that mean for you? What was your childhood like? How did you realize you were an empath? Just kind of the basics of kind of like, let's start at the beginning. So can you give us just a little bit of backstory about you and your experience as a sensitive person?
Sure. I probably didn't realize that I was an empath or a highly sensitive person until I was in my 40s. But once I understood, everything just started checking off the boxes, because, right from the get-go, I was in a family where I didn't feel like I fitted into that family at all. I used to even ask them if I was adopted because I was so different to the other members of my family. For a start, I was like highly sensitive and I could just pick up all the energies of what was going on. And I'd walk into a room and know something was off, but everybody would dismiss it and, tell me to stop being so silly, stop being so sensitive and just to get on with it. And I guess I grew up with this being a big feature throughout my entire life. I actually never really felt like I fit into anywhere, really. I was always like a bystander on the sidelines, looking at whatever was happening, picking up all the energies, assimilating all that, being highly intuitive. And I didn't realize I was highly intuitive because all of this, until I sort of understood what it was all about, all of this was just, natural to me. And I didn't realize that other people didn't feel the energies like I did, didn't read rooms like I did, didn't have that intuition or that just sense of knowing. And once I realized I had that, now it starts to make sense. Very tough road, very difficult childhood, teens, early 20s, until I got to my 40s. It seemed like I just didn't know where I fit into this world.
Yeah. I'm curious, how old was Tal when you realized this? Was she?
So she was about 5 or 6, and
that makes sense to me.
Yes. And I guess together we were just, teaching each other. Like I was, without realizing that she had night terrors. And she had those from 18 months old to 7.5 years. And so we would go through these rituals where I would say she was protected by her angels, that the house was protected, the car was protected, we were all protected. And just to try and ease her through that time. But it was chaotic, but revealing at the same time. It was like I was already tapping into this unknown world that was going to be revealed to me.
Yes, yes. Well, and it seems like I've had a number of conversations with women about how having highly sensitive children really brings our own sensitivity up to the forefront. And that there's this feedback loop, that there's this way that our children or our daughters mirror our own sensitivity. And that you could be kind of, as you see the sensitivity and the awareness and the empathy in your child, suddenly you can sort of recognize it in yourself. So the fact that she was 5 or 6 when you started to become aware of this makes complete, it sort of tracks. The other thing I just want to say is that, the way you describe your childhood experience, I swear to God, we could have a script for the first 5 minutes of this podcast, because almost everybody has such an incredibly similar story, that they didn't realize they were different, that they thought other people were sensitive like this too, but then they realized they weren't. But also just that they were constantly being told, you're being too sensitive, you're being silly, you're making too big a deal out of this. And it blows my mind how persistent this particular piece of story is for all of us, that it's like living in this time, there's just been so little room for sensitivity.
I'm also a great believer that we are born into the families that most need us to face the challenges that we face. Like, it was extremely difficult and yet highly revealing. And in hindsight, I always say that my family were the greatest teachers for me at that stage, because they taught me how to be resilient. They taught me how to stand on my own feet and almost buckle down, hunker down and deal with this. And, because even to this day, I'm still the different one. I'm still the one that they don't really understand, but I guess they tolerate more. And and I delve into things that I don't even talk to them about, because it's so off the realm of their consciousness and awareness.
Right.
And that's what I think we are. That's what I think highly sensitive people are. We are operating on a plane that a lot of the everyday people, and I don't mean this in any way unkindly, but I just feel like a lot of people are unconscious to what has been revealed to us.
Yes. Well, and I've been thinking a lot about the word ESP, extrasensory, or the words ESP, extrasensory perception. And, what I think for empaths, intuitives, psychics and mediums, we all have amplified ESP. We all have a capacity for ESP that is greater than a lot of other people. And I believe we're all awakening to it, but that there are those of us, it's almost like there's one thrown into every family that's like the canary in the coal mine who's feeling all the feelings. I'm struck by, as we're talking about this, as you were saying, being raised in your family raised you to have a certain amount of resilience. And I'm imagining that must have been an incredible gift when Tal died.
I think my whole entire life was preparing me for that event. Yeah. And I say that because, it was all these really tough lessons and that resilience. But it was also my reaction to hearing whenever teenagers were killed in car accidents. And I used to just have this really strange reaction, like it was an overreaction. And I'd think to myself, I don't know how those parents could possibly cope with losing a teen in a car accident. I mean, that must be the worst nightmare. And then lo and behold, it happens to me.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a coming home. It was like on a deeper level, I knew that was going to happen. And that deeper level was that it was very quickly revealed to me that if this was to happen to Tal, then I knew that this was going to happen to her. I'd signed up to that. That was part of my soul plan.
Yeah.
And if I'd signed up to that, then so had she.
Yes.
So, oh my gosh, it was unimaginably heartbreaking. Yet at the same time, I knew that it was in the order of things, that this was meant to happen, and there was no way I could change it. But just that knowing certainly helped me navigate it in a completely different way.
I think about two examples of sort of well-known people who've had sort of poetic deaths, in the sense of like you just kind of know it's destined. And Steve Irwin, I think it's Irwin, the snake guy from...
Oh, Irwin?
Irwin, yes.
Yes.
His death was so, in some way, just like so specific and precise. I mean, absolutely tragic. But to be impaled by a stingray, like there was just something so exquisite, like it was befitting of who he was, at least. And I was thinking also about the musician Mark Bolan, who was the lead singer of T-Rex. He was obsessed with cars. He wrote he wrote songs about cars, but my understanding is he did not drive. And he ended up dying in a car accident. But it was sort of this like, there's just this really fascinating way that sometimes our deaths are just these poetic deaths, in the sense that you can almost see the universe just kind of planning these things out. But certainly it doesn't make it any less heartbreaking and tragic. But I want to go to the piece that you mentioned in your bio about the fact that when Tal died, she gave you a message very quickly. Can we talk about that? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, definitely. Let's step back a wee bit, because we were just about to, we did move home, or we moved into a new home, and we were supposed to do that the following weekend. But for some reason, and I don't even know how this happened, but I decided to do it a week earlier. And so I packed up everything and got us there. And Tal was so annoyed with me because she'd arranged a surprise with her friends that they were going to shift me instead of me doing most of the work myself. So I remember her being so cross with me shifting earlier. But we were moving into this place, this beautiful home in the country, lots of room. It was just like 5 minutes from town, yet we had the country living. Tal could have a cat, so she was so excited to be able to go to the SPCA and get a rescued cat. And, so we had lots to look forward to. And we had only just shifted into the home on the Sunday. We finished shifting, and then on the Wednesday was her accident. And
goodness.
I know. And we were supposed to meet for dinner. And so I gave her a call because I was running a little bit late from work and I thought she was at home. And so I said, well, shall we meet at home or shall we meet in town? Because I knew she had to then go on to work over in, a suburb or a city about 20 minutes away from us. And she went, hi, Mum, no. I'm just leaving Napier now. She said, I'll meet you at home because I need to pick up my uniform. And by the way, go check out my room. It looks amazing. And so I don't know how we finished off that phone call. I imagine that, okay, darling, I love you. See you soon. That typical thing. And that phone call was actually before she died, as it turned. And as I was driving out of work, there was this, sunstrike that the sun just burst through the clouds. And I remember thinking, holy heck. And then we believe that was the same time that Tal was born at and got the sun. And so ended up with her wheels a little bit too far to the left. There was a hulking great big drain there, ditch over 1 meter high. And so she overcorrected. And, that's caused her accident.
Right.
But also at that exact same time, my sister, who lived in the same region as I did, her daughter had this excruciating stomach pain, just as, and my sister Margie remembers, the sun bursting through. So it's really strange that, we all connected with that sunstrike, and then that coincided with the time Tal died. So what she did is she came to me as soon as she knew that she had transitioned. She came to me because I was busy unpacking a box and I was just overcome with this feeling of dread. And I remember walking out to the kitchen, looking up at the clock and going, "Where are you? Where are you, baby?" And I just wanted to hop into my car and go and find her. But I didn't know which way she would be coming home to me because there were several ways. So instead, I then picked up the phone and tried to call her. She didn't pick up. It just went to answer phone. Then I called her friend, who I knew had the location of Tal on her phone. They both tracked each other. And that went to voice message. And so I cried, leaving a message. Now, I don't cry, but I cried saying, "I think something's happened to Tal. When you get this message, please call." She phoned as I was speaking to the police, and I didn't have my glasses on and I couldn't pick up the call, but she sent me through the location of where Tal was. And so I said to the police, "Hang on a moment, I've got the location of her vehicle, so just bear with me." And so I enlarged it and found it, and I said the name of the road. And they said, "Just one moment." And whereas before, when they put me on hold, I could hear the background noise, this time there was dead silence. And then they came on the phone and said, "Look, yes, we can confirm there's an act. We've closed the road off. You just stay with where you are because you can't get near the accident. And we'll give you a call, shortly. We'll update you." I don't know exactly what they said, but I knew when I hung up, like hell, I'm staying put. So I phoned the hospital to check for any incoming ambulance. And they said, "Cheryl, no, nothing incoming." Then I Googled, and within the hour, it was up on Google that there was a fatality between a truck and a car on that exact same. And I thought to myself, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know who that fatality is. And of course, that was my beautiful girl. So she'd come to me to let me know. And then just several minutes later, there was a police car in my driveway. And we used to have this ad on television, like the police hopping out of the car and coming up and knocking on the door. And I just went, no, not my beautiful girl. But yeah. I knew she'd come to me.
And when you say she came to you, how that?
Well, I just knew she was with me. I knew, I can't explain what it was, but it was this knowing. But it was this knowing ramped up to the nth degree, and she was giving me signs.
You could feel.
Yeah, and she was giving me a picture, and I don't see pictures, but I know. It's again like this knowing, and she was ticking off a checklist. Like, "Mum, I've done everything I need to do." And I was going, no, we just got to the good part, and gosh, and then there were lots of coincidences and lots of things that came out in the following days. And like, she had to go to the coroner, and that had to be out of town. And I just knew I needed her to be with me. And as soon as her coffin came back into the house, it was like this incredible golden light came with her. And you mentioned to me a golden light.
Yeah, well, every time I tune into her, I get this sense of just this amazing golden dawn.
Yeah. And it was like that was her coming home to me. And she was where she needed to be. We needed to be together. And it was like she was telling me, I'm never leaving. And then she just cocooned in this wealth of love. It was, I can't describe it, but it was just like this being enveloped in like this beautiful, beautiful cocoon of love. And she did that for 6 months, and she just gradually just released when she knew that I was in a position to be able to cope with not having her. And so she kept directing me like, Mom, you've got all the tools already. Let's not make this all about, sad, and she would put songs, like the same song every time I hopped in the car.
What was that song?
Oh, it was Harry Styles' Sign of the And if you see the lyrics, you just know she was sending me a signal, and she was sending me a message every single time. And then she was just like, I went to a clairvoyant medium, a show that was in our area six weeks after she died. And I was getting Sue to sign the book at the end, and she just channeled Tal automatically and auto wrote in the book. So the message was from Tal, like, I'm never leaving you, Mum. I'm always with you. And that confirmed, but also Sue channeled, like the whole accident verbatim about how it had happened. I didn't say a word, and she just kept coming through with all these images, and that my dad had passed, and that he was with her, and that all of these signs that just made so much sense. And so I just had the most incredible reaction to her dying. Like, it was the worst, yet she was opening me up to the best as well. And it's so hard to explain the dichotomy of this, but she was just saying, almost like, not almost, like she's telling me, get it right, Mum. She was telling me, I can do more for you from the other side than what I've, and she did a lot in the 18.
Yeah. So I keep on thinking about the cat and just wondering, I'm imagining, did you guys get a cat, or did that not get to happen?
Well, I said
or did
to
you
her,
end up getting a cat later because she wanted the cat?
She wanted the cat, but we didn't get it. I said to her, as soon as we get some of these boxes unpacked and get a bit more settled, we'll go and get the cat. You choose the cat. We'll go and get the cat. Now, that's an interesting story, because the SPCA was just down the road from us. And so I went there 6 weeks, about the same time, 6 weeks after she passed. And I went in, and there was this cat in this cage in reception. And I just was instantly attracted to this. And this cat, they said, well, she'd been bullied by the other cats. And so they put her in there so that they could give her some peace. And she was a really, highly strung. She was a bit, and so I said, well, can I cuddle her and just see, And they said, oh, she doesn't cuddle very easily. But she came straight to me. She just came straight and cuddled into me. And it was just like I knew. And then I popped her back into her cage, and I thought, I better go and have a look at the other cats. But really, I had no interest in them whatsoever. It was just a cursory look, and I came straight back to her, and I said, this is the one that's coming home with. And yes, this was Tal's cat. And oh my gosh. And already Tal had started to work her magic by teaching me energy healing. So so this cat was so timid and so skittery. She just went and hid behind furniture when anybody came to the door. So so I just asked her if she would allow me to work on her, and I did some energy healing on her, just release some of these emotions that made her so fearful and afraid. And before you know it, she was just starting to cuddle in, and she would, work her way under the covers with me, and it was like Tal cuddling me. It was like she was saying, I'm right here beside you, Mama.
Yeah.
I'm never leaving you. It doesn't matter where you go, I'm coming with you. And that cat was part of the journey. And interestingly, when I went to leave Hawke's Bay, which was where I was living, I had my sister and my brother-in-law and my niece living with us as their new house was being built. And it was just like this cat was a healer as well, because she would hop onto my sister's lap and just purr and just exude this love to my sister, which I knew my sister needed.
Yeah.
My sister was brought up, we were just all brought up so resilient, but so separate to each other. And so, okay, I'm going to face this world and no matter what. And she had so many shields up. And I just thought, wow, she can work a magic on her. So I actually left the region. It sounds funny, but I knew it was right to leave my Quizzy, healing that, giving them the love that they need. And so.
I was going to ask you what you named her. So Quizzy?
Quizzy, inquisitive.
Inquisitive. Oh, what a wonderful name for her. And what kind of cat was she?
Oh, she was just this beautiful, like gray stripe. She had unusual stripes on, and I think they actually dated back to Egypt, and Cleopatra comes to mind, and she was just beautiful.
Oh.
Now I'm not good with breeds and things like that, but she was our cat. And
wonderful.
Yeah, that's all that mattered.
That is all that mattered. Yeah.
Yes.
As you were telling the story, it was like I could just feel how I'm so glad you got that cat, because it feels like that was when you said she had ticked off all the boxes and had done all the things. The one thing she hadn't done was gotten a cat.
But she just knew. It's like Tal, just days before her accident, she'd come home so excited. She was working at this really lovely restaurant and called the Emporium, and she came home so excited. She said, "Okay, Mum, I've booked us a table, and it's in the corner out of the way so we can't be disturbed, because we're going to plan how I'm going to get to Costa Rica." And the reason she wanted to go to Costa Rica was like, that was always on the bucket list, but she'd amped it up. It was like she finally knew what her life purpose was going to be. And she was an extremely good athlete. And so she was going to do these outward bound leadership courses in Costa Rica. And that's what we were going to plan. And the fact that, she told me later, the fact that she just decided that and knew what her life's purpose was ticking off another box. And she just got her first raise from the organization. So that was another box ticked off. And I swear, when I told her bosses that, unfortunately, because she was due to work that night, well, when I phoned up and said, "Hey, she's not going to work tonight. Something's happened to her." I didn't know what at that stage. And then when I phoned back and confirmed it, they closed the restaurant. They closed the place down straight away. And then there were 40 plus staff who came to her funeral because they couldn't decide who should stay behind. And they didn't feel anybody should stay behind. She had made such an impact. In 3 months, she worked there on the whole entire organization. And that was Tal. Everywhere she went, she made an impact on people.
Yeah.
And we had hundreds of people at her funeral. And it was like, oh my gosh, darling, look at the impact you made on people's lives.
Yeah.
And it was across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that piece of look at the impact you've made in people's lives, she's 18 years old and she's already had this ability to connect with so many people. And I think it's really sad that we have funerals after people go, because I think that the thing about a funeral is that it's one of the few places where you really get to understand what kind of impact you've had in the world. And I wish we had more opportunities to let people know how significant they've been before it's too late.
I say, yeah.
Before their at least their conscious living mind has the ability to appreciate it. Because I think the body getting
She was very involved in that. It was a celebration of life rather than a funeral. I didn't even wear black. I wore this white dress with a yellow, white daisies with yellow centers on it.
Nice.
And I walked into the store that morning of her funeral and then chose that. And it was just like it was all meant to be. And then I went to a cafe because I wanted to speak about her. I didn't want anybody to talk about her because I knew her the best. I mean, that her friends spoke about the impact, but, as far as the main eulogy, I spoke. Because even though it was the hardest thing ever, I knew Tal. I knew her in a way other people didn't, and I wanted to share that. And she even had a primary school teacher from the area I'm living now, which is about 3 hours away from where we were living at the time, come down to the funeral when she knew about it, because even at that stage, Tal had made such a
I mean, she's made an I met her on the other, and now that she's over on the other side, and she's still, I mean, her presence is so palpable and strong and amazing. Yeah. I'm curious, actually, in having conversations over the years with people whose beloveds have crossed over and who still have a connection with them. One of the things I've actually seen as being a pressure that people seem to get is the moving on thing, or the having sort of this, because some people do not have the ability to be in communication with the dead, that there are these people who sort of think that this is a coping thing, but that they're, and that they have a lot of expectations. I've seen this around grief in general. There's a timeline, people are okay, it's been a year. Come on, move along. I'm wondering if you had that experience, that if you got pushback for the beautiful side of grief.
No, never, ever. In fact, it seems to attract people, because I think there are many people out there who feel like me, that as sad as it is to lose somebody, it's a reality of life.
It is a reality of life.
And we die. Yeah. And we don't get, it's in no natural order. We don't get to choose how that's going to play out. And I think, look, I still grieve for this beautiful girl today, in what we could have had, me being a grandma to her children, and all of seeing her, get married and all of those wonderful things, and just knowing what she would have made of her life, because that would have been exciting in itself. However, she left me with a truckload of memories in those 18 years that I value and I hold on to and I treasure. And she also guided me with so many tools along the way to both respect that, yes, I'm going to have moments where I feel immensely heartbroken still that she's not with me. But on the other side, let's embrace her living 18 years in a way that neither of us imagined. And that when she says she could do more for me on the other side, for the first time in my life, because I was very much being extremely hypersensitive. I was a perfectionist. That was my way of controlling my world that I didn't have any control over. And, but that set me up to be this, oh my gosh. I think it was a tough life to live, because I had so many expectations of myself, of others, and I was always trying to reach this plateau. So being Tal's mum, she was hard. She wasn't an easy child. And so she constantly pushed at those boundaries. And she actually enabled me to start letting them go, to find the fun side in life, to laugh at myself, and actually to set boundaries for myself where I could say no to people instead of yes, 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 I'll do everything. Mind you, she volunteered me for quite a bit. Just so she didn't always help that. But, so it was that. But then after she died, that ramped up to the nth degree, because I say very early in the piece, when I was traveling to the beach, a beach which is this beautiful strip of land, which has just got an amazing energy to it. And that is and still is my healing place, where I could just go and just sit with what had happened. And on the way, I was listening, I downloaded, podcasts, and I happened to be listening to an energy healer. And then he actually had an offer where I could download his energy healing platform and release emotions. And so when I got to the beach, that's what I did. I started muscle testing, teaching myself muscle testing, and I released so much that was holding me back in this life. I released a lot around the grief and the unworthiness I felt and the not fitting in and all those emotions that are wrapped around that, and being a perfectionist and all the fears I had. I just started releasing all that. And I remember reaching a place where I felt so calm and relaxed and at peace. And I thought, wow, I have never, ever felt this in my life. And so then I started releasing, well, I don't care what anybody else thinks about me. I am just going to do me, and however that looks. The worst has happened to me. Nothing worse can happen to me. Mm-hmm. So I don't care anymore. And it's not like I didn't care, but I didn't care about what other people thought about me. And I allowed myself to step into being my truly authentic self, which, of course, led to the podcast.
Yeah. Well, the words "you divested" comes to my mind. Like you divested of all of the extraneous stuff. You divested of all of the things that just don't matter. Yeah. I think about that Janis Joplin, like freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And I really do think it's like when you have been through the absolute worst thing that you could possibly go through, then there's a courage that can come from that, because it's like, you've been through it and you're still here. Okay, so now what are you going to do with the rest of your one wild and precious life? And so it makes sense that you would say, okay, I'm going to go for it.
And it's not that you don't face other challenges, because, I had another enormous challenge whereby I had just met somebody through work, and I hadn't been in a relationship really for about 20 plus years. And so this was a big deal to me. I'd really got myself in a good place where I was ready to have somebody in my life and, a partner and like that. And so I met this wonderful, wonderful guy through work. We just got talking and, just built up that connection. And then we decided, let's give it a go. And so we started developing that relationship on a whole different level, but we didn't want anybody at work to know. And then we'd only 4 weeks into, that whole journey of deciding that that's what we were looking at. He was going on a camping trip and so excited about it. And I was so happy for him. And the first night on that camping trip, so here I am then getting told, and because nobody knew about it, oh my gosh, it was just like I had to navigate a whole, grief in a whole different form again. Yet what I'd been through with Tal allowed me to deal with that. I knew I had the tools to deal with that. Yet what it gave me was a freedom to grieve for her as well as aid in a way that I hadn't allowed myself with Tal. I was so busy keeping everybody else all her friends and that, making sure that they were okay and making sure everybody else was okay, that I never really fully allowed myself to grieve.
Yeah.
So then she was saying, okay, you need to, Mum. So yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And so this was just over a year ago. So again, it's not that you're exempt from huge trials in your life once you reach the stage of freedom and letting go. It's that you are, again, more prepared on a level that you're grateful for and you didn't expect, to be able to, face these things.
So many of the things you just said, like one thing that comes to my mind is that it makes sense to me from just the stages of grief and the way that grief works is that like we are so numb at the very beginning that we do have a tendency to do these things where it's like we're just kind of like going through the motions and putting it all together. And in grief, when I was in seminary, I learned the term compounded loss, like the idea that like whenever you have one grief is always compounded on the previous griefs. But it makes sense to me that like you were in that shock bargaining, complete awe stage when Tal died, that when he died, you could finally, like there was space for you to grieve. That makes complete sense.
And what I learned was that, and what I highly respect now is that there are no norms and there are no stages. I didn't go through anger. I didn't go through denial. I accepted right from the get-go that this beautiful girl was gone and she was never coming back in the form that I knew.
Yeah.
And so there were lots of that I didn't experience. And so what that allowed me to do was to recognize that, just like everything, we seem to be conditioned about how we should do funerals, how we should talk about death, how we should talk about our emotions following. And there's some people that are so conditioned that it's a hard and fast way. And, and one thing that really is a trigger is that, I often see in Facebook and groups and things like that, where people get so angry that somebody said, oh, I just lost my grandma, and, I know how you feel about losing your daughter. Well, to me, I was grateful for those comments because that was the only level that they could relate to this loss on. Yet so many people get upset about that. How can you compare your grandma who lived a great life to, 80s, 90s? How can you compare that with losing a child? You can't.
You can't.
Well, of course you can't.
But at the same time, grief is grief.
And people don't always have the words. So they reach for the closest thing that they can relate to. And then often, like, people would come up to me and I could see their eyes, like, what the hell am I going to, excuse me, what am I going to say?
I swear. Yes.
Oh, yeah. What the heck am I going to say? There is nothing I can say. And I recognized that. And I used to just say, there is nothing you can say. Let's just hug. Because I felt those hugs spoke volumes more than words ever could.
More than words ever could. Yeah. And I think so often people get themselves caught in trying to say the right thing and sometimes really put their foot in it.
Yeah. And that's okay. Put your foot in it.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's better to reach out and make a connection than it is to just avoid it. I've also seen that the stage or the people who are just in that bitter grief where they are really angry, where it's sort of like, how dare you compare this person to that? And I had a situation many years ago where some dear friends of mine had lost their dog and they were profoundly heartbroken. This was a soulmate of theirs. And another friend who had lost their spouse a couple of years prior to that was really bitter that they were so verklempt about the loss of their dog. And I'm kind of like, it's just like grief, as you were saying, grief shows up in really weird ways and grief shows up in very unpredictable ways. And in this person's case, part of the way that their grief is manifested is in this kind of like, my grief is bigger than yours.
Oh, gosh.
My grief
Yeah.
is the worst grief ever.
No comparison.
Nobody could ever know how bad. And, from my perspective, it seems like the best thing we can possibly do is grant all of ourselves mercy and grace, because grief is unpredictable.
The way I look at it, and I don't know how others look at it, this is just my personal opinion, is that what grief does is it opens Pandora's box.
Yes.
So whatever you've experienced in your life then becomes open game for when you experience grief, because often it's so, like you say, so mind-numbing and earth-shattering, and it's like you can't explain it.
No.
So what it does is it just rips you open raw and wide, and whatever you've been suppressing, repressing, hurting in the past about, that's fair game to come out and be expressed in the grief that you're facing. And that's why there is no right or wrong solution for dealing with grief. It's like, let's support wherever you are, however you are on your journey. And that's why I interview across the board many types of grief. And it's not even to do with loss sometimes. It's about the grief of losing your job, or, or the home that you've always, thought you would have, and now suddenly that is gone, or the grief of actually being a parent at home looking after these beautiful children, but actually, who are you now? You were this, important person in your job prior to having kids.
Yes.
And now you're at home talking to kids, and who are you? And you grieve that. So, grief shows up in so many different forms, and that's what I love about the platform I have.
Yeah. I'm thinking that one thing I've also noticed when it comes to grief, and this is something that people don't really talk about, but I've seen consistently in conversations again and again, is that grief is exhausting. And particularly death, the grief of a death is really exhausting. And there's a bone weariness, there's an exhaustion, there's a tiredness that, and the thing is that true grief, you can't suck it up and just like muscle your way through necessarily. Like there are points where it's like the body knows what it needs to do and it's going to do it. Our soul is going to do what it needs to do. And it's unpredictable, but also I've definitely seen that it is very.
So I didn't experience that to that degree. And I think it's like I mentioned earlier, because I was so in coping mode.
Yeah.
And I guess, that's where my whole life again had prepared me. It was like, okay, you've been knocked down again. This time, you're really going to have to dust your knees off, because this is a biggie. But you can do it. So just get up, get on. And so I was never a person that just shut the door, pulled the curtains and hunkered down. I was still very, very functional. And again, because I'm a bit of a soloist, I just felt I still had a lot of stuff I needed to organize and arrange and sort. And so there was no time for me to to really sink into it. And I think, and I completely understand when people do, don't get me wrong, but that's where, when it and that's why now, interesting, because I mentioned to you off air that I've gone through a health issue that has caused me just to, hand in my resignation from my job, which really is something that came out of the blue, and, I wouldn't have done lightly. But every single message I get is, you need this time to take care of you, to heal, to, take that time. So I was in enforced sick leave because I had something going on that I could not do anything about. And I tried and I tried, but it was like I had no option but to take that time out and I just think that's the universe saying, okay, you've done it for all of these years. It's 6 years now, and about 14 months after Adrian. So I think now I can allow my body just to take that time, exactly what you mentioned, and hunker down.
Yes. Yes. Well, and as we've been saying, it is unpredictable. There is no way of knowing it. We're right at that point where I say, oh my goodness, Helen, I can't believe how fast the time has gone by. But I really want to draw out something you said earlier, because, like you basically were like we're all going to die. Mm-hmm. And that, and I was thinking about this. It's like, it's sort of funny how we treat death as if it's this big surprise when it is the one guarantee that we get. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard the joke that life is a fatal sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah.
But that, it's so, there's a way in which, as I'm listening to this, it's almost like we need to embrace the inevitability of grief and because it's inevitable. It is, it's not something we can avoid. It's not something that we can escape, or we can, if we just like do all the right things, somehow we're going to live forever. It's like, I was thinking, it's like we will experience death upon death upon death until one day we die. And then, but that's the way it works. And it's sad to me that we live in a world where, and Tal, I can feel her. She's like, duh. Also, like, why are you, just the perspective they have, which is so different than ours, because they're just kind of like, it's not that big a deal. It's not nearly as hard as you make it to as human beings. It's kind of like, it's just the nature of time, the nature of things, the flow of all that is true and good and right.
I think what we probably need to be doing is having these open, honest conversations about death and accepting that there is going to be a final point at some stage. We never know what is around the corner. And so let's have these conversations so we're prepared for it. For the reason is that, are you living the life that you want to be living here and now? And I think this is the biggest thing. So for me, my absolute passion is to be interviewing, to hear their stories, to share their stories, to then help others. That I feel is my purpose, my mission. Everybody has always mentioned I am full of wisdom. And I feel like that was my gift in this lifetime. And I didn't realize, I thought, again, everybody knew what I knew. And that, so sometimes when I say something, people go, oh my gosh, you're like a sage. And I go, really? I don't feel like that at all. However, what that's telling you is that if you're stuck in a dead-end job or you're having issues with your family or your marriage or whatever, really stop and take check. You need to be able to live your authentic self. You need to have the freedom to be exactly who you are and to express that without censure, as long as you're not harming anybody else. And I think that's what the gift of facing up to our mortality allows us to do.
Yes, that just the facing our mortality, I think, is to giving ourselves permission. And
yes.
Yeah.
Without the conditions, so many people are living by other people's rules that have been imposed upon them as children in the best meaning and well-meaning situations and circumstances. However, if you are not totally aligned with those beliefs, then you need to look at what is important to you, and then be living by those beliefs and values.
Yes.
What's the worst that can happen?
Right. Well, and my husband and I will do that. Like when the anxiety is really taking over for me, he'll we run the scenario, and he always is like, "What's the worst thing that will happen?" And I just cut to the chase, and I'm like, "I'll die," and he goes, "And then?" And I'm like, "And I'll be okay," because it's sort of like we push it and push it and push it until ultimately we come back to source. And for me, there is something really just like remembering, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I will, that I can die. And then, so Helen, really is that point where it's like we've hit that time.
Sure.
This conversation has been so rich. I could talk to you for hours about all of this, and Tal with comments from the peanut gallery coming to you and me with this. Although I think she's been pretty pleased with the conversation there. But a couple of times there I checked in and I'm like, do you want me to ask anything else? And she's just like, no, you're doing good. Keep going. Although the cat was an important question.
Yes.
But, is there anything else that feels really important to share before we...
Again, I would just say on the thing that we were just talking about is that, we're all here, just look at life's challenges as the path to knowing what your purpose is going to be. Why are you here? And, you totally have control of that. It all comes from within. And keep looking within for your own healing, physically, mentally, emotionally. Look inward and just ask yourself, what is this experience teaching me? And then make peace with it. It's okay that you're going through shit times and that you sometimes have no control over. But what you do have control over is the way you think about those experiences. And that is so, so important because, once you start thinking like that, the solutions come and you make really good decisions. So we all should be heading toward what we're here for. We all have a gift. It's no accident that we're here. We're perfect as we are. So let's go out, embrace that, and do it.
Awesome. So, Helen, there are two more things. As I mentioned to you before, I love to do a little bit of time travel because I really believe that podcasts exist outside of time. They are listened to for many, many years, but there's a river of time. And it's like that broadcast is like a stone that drops in and ripples both ways. And so I really believe that we can send a broadcast, that we are sending a broadcast back to another part of ourselves, to another time, another place. So my question to you is, who is the Helen that we are sending a message back to? When are we sending a message back to? And what is the message? What is the transmission that you are going to share? Like what, just we're going to talk to her. What do you say?
The message I'm wanting to share is that I believe we all have greatness within. And so I would like to go back to the time where I most felt unworthy and not believing that I was deserving of greatness and greatness to serve others especially. And I would most like to go back to that and release that. Now, this time goes very far back at me, I feel. Like it goes back through several lifetimes, and I feel like I just need to release and know that, I've always used an analogy in this lifetime is that, the people that pick up our rubbish are so deserving of our gratitude and our thanks. And they are equally worthy of recognition as a person who is our bank manager or, in that so-called elevator position. I believe no matter what we're doing, how we're doing it, that is our role and we're all worthy and deserving. So I want to go back to those times where I felt less.
Yeah. And what do you say to her?
It's like, you would deserve, like I see this little flower girl, a child in the cold, ragged, selling flowers and not feeling worthy because people just dismiss her or ignore her or, she's cold, she's not, she doesn't have the basics in life. Yeah. And I want people to say that, she is worthy and and that she is doing a good job. You know, there are people who need the flowers to make a change in their life. So she's providing an essential role. So she needs to stand tall and, you know, just wrap that shawl around her a bit stronger and shine her light, because she has a beautiful light within, but it's her own self that dims that light when she doesn't feel what she is doing is enough.
Yeah. So I'm really hearing you are enough.
You are enough.
You are enough. Just as you are. Shine your light. You belong here. You deserve to be here. You are worthy. You are enough.
Yeah. That was beautiful.
So, Helen, final question. How do we find your podcast? How do we get in touch?
Yeah. So if you just Google, good old Google, the beautiful side of grief, that will take you to where you can find it. It's on so many platforms. You can also go and have a look at my website, which is healing with the number 2, the letter B, the letter U, healing2beyou.com. So that's https://healing2beyou.com. That's got a lot of information in it. And of course, you know, just search on Facebook. And also my Instagram is under healing2beyou_. And so just connect either way. Send me an email if you want to reach out. I'm always happy to hear from anyone.
Awesome. Well, and if you come over to empathicmasteryshow.com, you can find all of the links for Helen in the show notes. I'll also include the interview that she did with me on her podcast in our show notes as well, so that you guys can catch Helen on both sides of the microphone. Helen, this conversation has been so beautiful and rich and lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your truth, your candor, your heart. This has been beautiful.
Jan, we're so grateful to have this platform to share this story. And you are such insightful, beautiful questions, which I think, you know, needed to be asked. So I'm really grateful to you for doing that and for giving me this time. So my heart to you and our heart to you. Thank you.
As we come to the end of this episode, I'd love to hear what you're taking from this show. Please jump over to empathicmasteryshow.com to leave your comments. In the show notes, you'll find a link to grab your copy of my Empathic Safety Guide, 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm. And while you're there, please subscribe and follow this show. And thank you for your help sharing this show with the people who need it. Please help me to spread the word and send this podcast to friends or family members who need support living as highly sensitive empathic people. Then join me again when the next Empathic Mastery Show airs. Okay, one last time. Hop over to empathicmasteryshow.com for your Empathic Safety Guide. And until next show, shine on. We need you and your gifts here on this planet. So please don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards.